pay her so much to say that. I'm actually a little overwhelmed with emotion. Just hearing Georgia speak and hearing you, Rachel, speak, Nipani, Father Frank, Ryan, I'm just... my system's an overload.
You should have been here this morning.
So what I want us to do is, just as a community, just take a moment, just breathe a little bit. Because we've got a lot of oxytocin in our brain. We've got a lot of activity in our singular gyrus, which is in charge of emotive activity. And what we're doing is we're simulating all the experiences that we've just heard. It's one of the beautiful things about being human, but it's also one of the most overwhelming things, to really be present when others are sharing something deep and profound. So let's just take a moment. My heart is really racing, just... Good afternoon. Thank you for that lovely introduction, which cost me everything I have in terms of monetary value. I want to begin, like I've begun so many things, with an acknowledgement to country. I want to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people. I want to pay my respects. I want to extend my deep gratitude. And I do so not out of protocol, just like all the previous speakers, not out of protocol. I do so because I'm in the presence of a living culture, of a culture that surrounds me, informs me, and is a part of who I am as an Australian. The dreaming lives on, and all of us are now a part of it. And I also say that because of some of the difficult issues we've all been seeing in the media. And I don't think it would be appropriate for me not to acknowledge that shadow that it casts over the entire continent. And the fact that we have not dealt with that. And as Carl Jung said, that which is unembraced becomes our destiny. And I also want to thank Radford for having me here. I want to thank Father Richard and the Browning family for their Christ-like hospitality. I've been here since Dirrum started. I was there when it began, and I've seen this little seed grow into this amazing orchard that I see before me. And having been on this journey with both the Radford students who've organised this and who have given so much of their time, their energy, their creativity in organising this event so we could have experiences like the one that I just had, I would like all of us to come together and give them a big round of applause because they have done so much. Right now, we are living the reality of the vision that you guys made manifest. I want you to have that. I wanted to do this conversation with you guys, and I was thinking, what could I offer? I've been teaching young men for almost about 2 years now how to go out into our community. These are incredibly privileged young men. How to go out into the community and how to create structural change, and how to deal with issues and injustices that don't really affect them in any way, at least not directly, at least not in an apparent way, at least not in the short-term interest manner. And the other hat that I want to wear today, alongside the teacher hat, is that of a newly minted sociologist. I want to reflect on this from a sociological perspective and really take up this idea of igniting action and taking up the challenge and reflect on it both practically but also ethically, predominantly for the young people that are here, but also hopefully there's something for the older audience as well. I think taking up the challenge is so incredibly important right now because it's so incredibly needed. As Father Frank touched upon, right now our world is struggling with what Ghassan Haj calls a profound scarcity of hope. A profound shortage of hope. And hope, for me as a sociologist, is people's sense of themselves and the social currents and the trajectory that it's taking. And it's not so much that there aren't struggles. Every generation has had struggles. Hope doesn't come from the struggles you're dealing with or the size of the obstacles, but rather what you think you have to be able to deal with that. That hope and that belief that I have all the resources I need to be able to deal with the challenges before me, that is frankly not there. As a community, we do not hope. We do not know how to generate sacred spaces like this. We do not know how to generate hope. And that's why you guys come in. And that's why taking the challenge to act, to do good, is so incredibly important. And when we don't have this hope, what happens is we fall into these self-fulfilling, or perhaps better, collective self-fulfilling prophecies. A social reality defined by a lack of hope is a profoundly bleak one. And what happens in that state is human beings get these two organs and they release a whole host of chemicals. The biggest one, of course, is cortisol. And cortisol goes into our brain and it really shuts down the communication between the fight or flight center, the aggression center, and that massive frontal lobe that we were gifted with. And because that connection is severed, the bit that gets really activated is that fight or flight center. Do I run away or do I fight? And the way it manifests itself is, how can I keep myself away from this danger, from this source of anxiety? And one of the biggest challenges we're facing is, how long do we advocate for a closed society? How long can folks keep on advocating for a closed society before it starts to become social reality? How long? Secondly, by taking up this challenge to do good, you are going to be running something of a countercultural program, because at the moment, we don't really have a vocabulary for the good in our culture. Instead, our predominant mode of thought is that of rights. And rights is okay, but the problem with rights is that they are profoundly individualistic, and once they're examined and once they're sliced and diced enough, it loses its sense of mutuality. It loses its sense of give and take. That is why the notion of the good needs to form the foundation of whatever action you want to take. And this notion of good, involving this give and take, firstly, must involve a gift from you that costs you something. Now, I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about something in your life, some kind of energy. Because giving someone a gift that has cost you something means that person has enough value such that it wanted a little bit of your life. So never give a gift that has cost you nothing. Similarly, never give a gift that cannot be reciprocated. There are cultures in which warfare is fought and politics is fought over gifts that cannot be reciprocated. So you give a gift to somebody and they can't reciprocate, and now they're under your power. The danger when you give a gift to someone who can't reciprocate it, or you won't ask for reciprocation, implicitly saying you have nothing to give back to me or to someone else. Give a gift. And one of the ways the person you're giving to can reciprocate is tell them, please pass it on to someone else. In that invitation to pass it on to someone else, you're already making a fundamental assumption about that person, that they have something of value to give to the rest of society. Number 3, when you are trying to find an action for the good, there are 2 helpful assumptions you can use. The first one is something of a practical postulate from philosophy. And it goes something like this: act as if you are free. Act as if you have the capacity to be able to change this. Act as if your self-determining agency is such that it can change the world. The reason why this is so important is because so many of the structural issues that we see, so many of the injustices that we see, so many of the material disparities that we see have not only conditioned the material world, but also our thoughts. I don't think we'll ever find a solution in the paradigms that gave rise to the problem. Pierre Bourdieu calls this symbolic violence. It is the violence upon our thoughts and the fact that we cannot go outside of them. That is why living under the practical postulate that you are free, it gives you that breathing room to be able to step outside the dominant paradigms of our society and see solutions that are not within that paradigm, that cannot be within that paradigm. And secondly, work with this assumption. This is called prefigurative politics. Assume as if the world that you want is already here. The world that you envision, the world of the good, is already here. And so for me, whenever I act, whenever I go to schools, and whenever I do things like this, I assume that A, I'm free, and B, that I'm living in a world where hope is in abundance. And it can be drawn out, and it can be shared, and it can be generated. I already live in that world. Prefigure the world that you already want to live in. So, where does your good come from? One helpful one set of helpful coordinates my mentor once gave me, and another Father Richard, but he's in WA, I call him the WA Father Richard, is, he's my second father, and Father Richard's my third father. So there's a little bit of competition, is think about your greatest strength. Think about your unique talents. Think about the thing that comes naturally to you, easily to you. I've had wonderful conversations with lots of you guys, and you have incredible intellects, incredible creativity. And also think about, where does your community's greatest need lie? And this community can be just this, or it can be Canberra, or it can be Australia, or it can be the whole globe. The scale almost doesn't matter. What is important is you find the coordinates at which your greatest strengths and your community's greatest needs intersect. And it's also in that place that you'll find some of the deepest fulfillment of your life. For me, to give you a very practical example, I've always enjoyed knowledge, and I've always enjoyed sharing knowledge, right? And one of the greatest needs I've found is the fact that we have so many young people who don't have mentors. And it turns out that's exactly where my fulfillment lies. I kind of think of myself as a gardener, but instead of raising plants, it's people, right? And you have to be really careful as a gardener, because you're not the plant, right? And you cannot take credit for the plant's growth. No, that's on the sapling. But what's on me, and what's on all of us, is the quality of the soil. That is something we can do. So my job is to make that soil as rich as possible, as nutritious as possible, so that sapling can get all the resources it needs, all the energy that it needs to grow as mighty and as fruitful as it has the potential to. Kind of like gardening people. That's where I found the greatest and deepest fulfillment of my life. Point number 5. In taking up this challenge to act, and I think this is true for all of us, you are coming to a fundamental realization that what we do in this world matters. But equally importantly, what we don't do matters as well. Our inactions as a society have profound consequences. With my boys at Scotch, there's this fascinating journey that they go on as they learn about these big social issues, and they pick one issue that they find really, really engaging and almost become mini experts on it. It's at the end of it, once the program has ended, that so many of them don't go, all right, this unit has ended, thanks Akram, I'm done with it. No, by going on this journey, they've realized that if they don't do this, if they don't advocate for change in this particular area of policy, nothing will change. Their inaction will have a consequence, and some human being down the line will suffer because of it. What we do matters, and what we don't do matters. We don't get a choice as to whether we have an effect on the world or not. What we do get a choice is, what kind of effect do we want? What kind of impact do we want? So in one sense, there's an ethical obligation to take up the challenge with open eyes. That there is no alternative possibility. There's no opting out of the law of cause and effect. That's right. That's right. And point number 6, and this again touches on what Father Frank said. I really want to explore that idea of ethical responsibility and acting with ethical responsibility. Part of the reason why we do have this duty to act in so many areas is not because of guilt. Please don't ever feel guilty for the privilege that you were born in. I was born in Afghanistan right in the middle of a civil war. I didn't choose that. There was this great philosopher, his name is Heidegger, and he said, we're thrown into this world. Literally, that's what it feels like. We're thrown into this world, and we don't really get a choice as to where, when, and importantly, to whom. You guys didn't get a choice either. You were thrown, and luckily you landed here on camera, which is a pretty awesome thing in the law of, if there was an escalator going down to bodies and God was kind of telling souls, you go that way, I wouldn't have gone towards the escalator that went to Afghanistan. There was a war going on there. I'd be like, where's the one that goes to Radford? Where is that one? Where's that one? You don't get that choice, unfortunately. However, you do get a choice when you do have privilege, what you do with that privilege. That is a choice we do get to get. And being an Australian and slowly learning about our history, I've come to the realization there's so many issues that we need to deal with, we need to act with, and the most predominant, of course, is Indigenous rights. The reason why I think we have an ethical responsibility there is because we are enjoying privileges, the cost of which has usually and silently been borne by someone else. Right? None of us were born during the colonial days. None of us did violence to the Indigenous Australians. We are not to blame for that. We do not have moral blame. That is really important that we all acknowledge that we are free from the sins of the past. We do not carry their sins. However, we are enjoying privileges right now that have come from those very actions. And it's incumbent upon us as ethical beings. We can't change the past, but we can make sure that those Australians no longer have to bear the negative externalities, those unspoken costs for the privileges that we enjoy. And point 7, think of this ethical obligation slightly on a grander scale. So many of the issues in our society, and this I'm speaking more to the adults now, has been because we misdiagnosed why we have those issues in the first place. So many of those issues are due to misdiagnosis. Part of what I get my boys to do at Scotch is essentially re-diagnose social problems back to the community itself. And because we have misdiagnosed so many of our social problems, even with the best of intentions, when we apply a policy, either it does nothing, a bit like a doctor misdiagnosing a patient and giving them drugs that doesn't do anything, or worse, policies that exacerbate the situation and make it even worse. In doing good, there's always, I think, an ethical obligation to take a step back and to really and critically assess the definition of the problem that we're taking into this action. Most of the politics I've seen being fought in just about every country isn't so much over the solution, it's over the definition of the problem. And whenever you guys will act, you'll find that is where you'll find the most contentious form of political conflict. And once you do get a consensus around a really good definition of the problem, you enter what David Graeber calls the pleasure of politics. And those two words usually don't go together, pleasure and politics. But that is what happens because you engage your incredible creative capacities and you bring to bear on it. Most of the time, all those creative capacities are used and dissipated over the very definition of the problem. Something that I think we're still struggling with, particularly when it comes to Indigenous Australians. And when you do take up this challenge, and when you do act, I really want you to understand something I've come to understand through my sociological training. Respect and recognition is magic, right? there's an alchemy process to it. We create something out of nothing. It costs us absolutely nothing to give someone respect and recognition. But the person at the receiving end, for them, it's invaluable. Right? And the reason for that, guys, is because our understanding of ourselves, it's actually profoundly defined by those who are looking upon us. Whenever you look at someone's gaze, whenever you look into their eyes, you're not just seeing into them, rather their gaze is also a mirror back onto you. And if that is ultimately where we get our understanding of ourselves, because there is no other, we can't ever step outside that perspective, if we are the mirrors in which others see themselves, and it's precisely that mirror that's the source of all value as well, by the way. Because value, again, David Graeber, is the importance of our own actions reflected back to us in the eyes of others. Why not make that gaze a little bit kinder than it's absolutely necessary? It costs us absolutely nothing. Why not use that gaze to be incredibly generous with our respect and our recognition? It costs us absolutely nothing. Point number 9, and really this is coming back to you, and this is something, Rachel, you touched upon. Our self-esteem, our self-worth does not come from the things that we have been given. If it did, then the wealthiest amongst us surely would be the most... They'd be jumping on the streets right now. They've been given so much. The weird thing about us as human beings is that our sense of worth, our self-esteem, our deepest sense of fulfillment comes from what we've been able to give to others. And in that act of giving and seeing somebody's life improve just a tiny little bit, or someone's suffering ameliorated or made a little bit lesser, just a little bit, we realize we're incredibly valuable. And the sad thing sometimes is when we ask young people nothing, there is no ask to serve. And the assumption that kids walk away with, and I've been to a lot of underprivileged schools, they never get asked to serve. I was never asked to serve. And you know what we assume? We have nothing to give. That will be of value to the rest of society, which is patently not true. Think about all that creativity. Think about all that intelligence. Think about all that love. How much love would we miss out on if you didn't have your business, Stephanie? And so, to those young people, let's act now. Please get in touch with myself. Please get in touch with Father Richard or with H. Act now. Please don't wait till tomorrow. And please don't mistake just motion for action, as Hemingway would say. Do not mistake the motion of your life for deliberative action, because this is what taking the challenge means. Going on this journey and reaching the other end where you're now taking deliberative and ethically justified action. If you're willing to go on that journey, we're willing to walk with you. Thank you so much for having me here, guys.